Would you trust a gift from your enemy? The Trojans did, and it changed history forever. This is the story of the Trojan Horse, one of the most enduring legends of the ancient world. It is a tale of war and love, of gods and men, of pride and deception. But more than that, it is a story of human weakness, the danger of ignoring wisdom, the risk of misplaced trust, and the devastating cost of betrayal. For centuries, poets and storytellers have retold this myth. Homer sang of the war in his Iliad. Virgil carried the survivors into his Aeneid. Artists carved the horse into stone, painted it onto canvas, and imagined it in every age. But behind the myth lies something deeper, a mirror of our own lives. Pride, desire, deception, and trust, these are not ancient relics. They are human truths. And so, we will journey together through the full tale, from the spark of war to the burning of Troy, and the lessons that still echo today. The Trojan War did not begin with armies or weapons. It began with beauty and with pride. Helen of Sparta was said to be the most beautiful woman in the world. Her face, poets claimed, was so radiant that it could launch 1,000 ships. She was married to King Menelaus, ruler of Sparta. But far away, in the city of Troy, a prince named Paris was destined to change the world. His fate was sealed not by his own hand, but by the quarrels of the gods. It began at a wedding, the marriage of Peleus and Thetis, parents of Achilles. All the gods were invited, except one, Eris, goddess of discord. Angered, she threw a golden apple into the feast, inscribed with the words, "To the fairest." Hera, queen of the gods, claimed it. Athena, goddess of wisdom, demanded it. Aphrodite, goddess of love, desired it. Unable to decide, they turned to Paris, prince of Troy, to judge. Each goddess offered him a gift. Hera promised power and kingship. Athena promised wisdom and victory in battle. Aphrodite promised the love of the most beautiful woman in the world. Paris chose Aphrodite. And so, with her blessing, he journeyed to Sparta, where he met Helen. Whether she went willingly or was taken by force, the stories differ. But one truth remains. Helen left Menelaus and sailed to Troy. To Menelaus, this was not just theft. It was humiliation. His honor was broken, his pride wounded. He called upon his brother Agamemnon, king of Mycenae, and together they rallied the Greek world. From every corner of Greece, heroes answered the call. Achilles, swift and unmatched in battle. Odysseus, cunning and clever. Ajax, strong and fearless. Diomedes, bold and daring. They gathered a fleet of 1,000 ships, united not only by loyalty but by oath. 4 years earlier, when Helen was sought by many suitors, her father had demanded that all who courted her swear to defend her marriage. Now, that oath bound them to war. And so, across the Aegean Sea, the Greeks sailed to Troy. But this was not only a war of men. The gods themselves took sides. Hera and Athena, angered by Paris's judgment, supported the Greeks. Aphrodite protected Paris and Troy. Poseidon, god of the sea, shifted his favor back and forth. Thus, the war was born, a war of men and gods alike, of pride and desire, of promises and betrayals. And at its heart was Helen, the woman whose beauty had become both a blessing and a curse. For 10 long years, the Greeks camped outside the walls of Troy. Imagine it, 1,000 ships drawn up on the shore, their sails furled, their warriors restless. The plain before the city became a battlefield, scarred by countless clashes. The Greeks launched assaults against the walls, but Troy's defenses were strong. The city was built on high ground, its gates fortified, its towers manned by vigilant soldiers. Every attempt to storm the walls was repelled. The war was not only fought in armies, but in duels. Heroes stepped forward to challenge one another, their names echoing through history. Achilles, the greatest warrior of the Greeks, swift of foot and unmatched in battle, clashed with Hector, the noble prince of Troy. Their duel was fierce, a storm of spears and shields. Hector fought bravely, but fate was against him. He fell beneath Achilles' wrath, and Troy mourned its champion. Yet even with Hector gone, Troy endured. The walls stood, the people resisted, and the Greeks grew weary. Inside the city, life continued under the shadow of war. Families prayed to the gods for deliverance. Priests offered sacrifices at the temples. Children grew up hearing the clash of weapons outside their gates. The marketplace still bustled, though goods grew scarce. The people of Troy lived with courage, refusing to surrender. Outside, the Greeks suffered. Their supplies dwindled, their morale faltered. Many longed to return home, to see their families again. The war dragged on year after year, with no end in sight. The gods themselves intervened in battles. Athena guided Greek warriors, whispering wisdom into their ears. Aphrodite shielded Paris from harm, rescuing him from duels he could not win. Poseidon stirred the seas, sometimes aiding the Greeks, sometimes hindering them. The war was a stage upon which both mortals and immortals played their parts. The siege became a stalemate. Neither side could claim victory. The Greeks had strength, but not breakthrough. The Trojans had walls, but not freedom. And so the war lingered, a heavy shadow over both peoples. Think of the endurance required to live through such a war. 10 years of waiting, of fighting, of hoping. 10 years of loss and sacrifice. The lesson here is clear. Sometimes battles are not won by strength, but by patience. The Trojans endured, and the Greeks persisted. Yet both paid a heavy price in time, in lives, and in sorrow. For 10 years, the Greeks had battered themselves against the walls of Troy. 10 years of bloodshed, of duels, of raids, of funerals. And yet, the city stood. The Greeks were weary. Their leaders argued. Some wanted to return home, defeated. Others demanded one final assault. But among them was a man whose mind was sharper than any sword, Odysseus, king of Ithaca. Odysseus was not the strongest warrior. He was not the tallest, nor the fiercest. But he was clever, cunning, and patient. He understood that wars are not always won by brute force. Sometimes they are won by deception. He proposed a plan so daring, so unexpected, that it would change the course of history. The Greeks would build a gift, a giant wooden horse. It would be hollow, large enough to hide warriors inside. The Greeks would pretend to retreat, sailing away from Troy. The horse would be left behind as an offering, a symbol of surrender, or perhaps a tribute to the gods. The Trojans, weary from war, proud of their endurance, would see the horse as a trophy. They would drag it into their city, celebrating their victory. And when night fell, when the city slept, the hidden warriors would emerge. They would open the gates, signal the fleet to return, and Troy would fall. It was a plan of deception, a strategy born not of strength, but of intelligence. And it was Odysseus who conceived it. The Greeks set to work. Carpenters cut timber, shaping it into the form of a horse, a sacred animal to the Trojans, a symbol of their god Poseidon. The horse was massive, towering above men, its belly hollow, its frame strong. Inside, A select group of warriors prepared to hide. Among them were Odysseus himself, Menelaus, Diomedes, and others chosen for their courage. They would endure the silence, the darkness, the suffocating air, until the moment came to strike. The rest of the Greek army pretended to retreat. They burned their tents, boarded their ships, and sailed away, but not far. They hid behind the nearby island of Tenedos, waiting for the signal. Think of the courage required to climb inside that wooden horse. To sit in silence, knowing that discovery meant death. To trust that the plan would succeed, that the Trojans would take the bait. It was not brute strength that won the war. It was cunning, patience, and the willingness to risk everything on a single deception. The Greeks had vanished. Their ships were gone, their camp destroyed. On the shore, only the great wooden horse remained, towering above the plain. The Trojans gathered around it, marveling at its size and craftsmanship. Some believed it was a sacred offering to the gods, a tribute left behind by the defeated Greeks. Others saw it as a trophy, proof of Troy's endurance after 10 years of war. But not all were convinced. Cassandra, daughter of King Priam, stood among the crowd. She had been cursed by Apollo, gifted with prophecy, but doomed never to be believed. Her voice rang out, warning her people, "Do not trust this gift. It will bring ruin. The Greeks are not gone. This horse is a trap." Her words fell on deaf ears. The people laughed, dismissing her as mad. 4 years she had spoken truth, and for years she had been ignored. Then came Laocoon, a priest of Troy. He too distrusted the horse. He cried out, "Beware of Greeks bearing gifts." His voice was strong, his conviction clear. He hurled a spear at the horse, and it struck with a hollow sound. The crowd fell silent. For a moment, doubt flickered in their hearts. But fate intervened. From the sea rose 2 great serpents, sent by the gods. They coiled around Laocoon and his sons, crushing them in their grip, dragging them beneath the waves. The Trojans watched in horror. To them, it was a sign. Laocoon had offended the gods by striking the horse. His death was punishment. The horse was sacred, a divine offering. And so, with pride and celebration, the Trojans dragged the horse through their gates. They placed it in the heart of their city, a monument to their victory. The warnings of Cassandra were ignored. The cries of Laocoon were silenced. The people rejoiced, believing the war was over. But in truth, their doom had already entered their walls. Think of the tragedy of Cassandra, cursed to see the truth, yet never believed. How many times in our own lives do we ignore the voices of wisdom, dismissing them as inconvenient or uncomfortable? Think of Laocoon, brave enough to speak against the crowd, punished for his honesty. How often do we silence those who warn us, preferring comfort over caution? The lesson is clear: ignoring wise voices can lead to disaster. Pride blinds us, and sometimes the truth is drowned out by the noise of celebration. The horse stood silent in the heart of Troy. Its wooden frame loomed over the city, a monument to victory, a symbol of pride. The Trojans celebrated, feasting and drinking, believing the war was finally over. But inside the horse, hidden in darkness, Greek warriors waited. Their hearts pounded, their breath shallow. They listened to the sounds of celebration outside, knowing that when night fell, the fate of Troy would be sealed. As the city slept, Odysseus gave the signal. The warriors crept out of the horse, silent as shadows. They moved through the streets, cutting down guards, opening the gates. Far off on the horizon, the Greek fleet returned. Their ships, hidden behind the island of Tenedos, now sailed back under cover of darkness. The gates of Troy swung open, and the army poured in. The city erupted in chaos. Flames rose into the sky as temples burned, homes collapsed, and families fled. The cries of Troy echoed through the night, cries of fear, of sorrow, of betrayal. King Priam, old and weary, sought refuge at the altar of Zeus. But even there, death found him. Neoptolemus, son of Achilles, struck him down, staining the sacred altar with blood. Women were dragged from their homes, children torn from their mothers. Cassandra, the prophetess, was seized and carried off. Andromache, wife of Hector, was taken as a slave. Aeneas, guided by the gods, gathered his family and fled into the night, destined to carry the Trojan legacy to a new land. The city that had stood for centuries, proud and strong, was gone in a single night of betrayal. Troy burned, and its ashes became legend. Think of the tragedy of Troy. 10 years of endurance, 10 years of courage, undone in a single night. The lesson is clear. One careless decision can undo centuries of strength. Pride blinded the Trojans. They ignored warnings, dismissed wisdom, and welcomed their doom with celebration. How often do we, too, invite danger into our lives, mistaking it for victory? How often do we ignore the hollow sound of warning, preferring comfort over caution? The fall of Troy is not just a story of ancient warriors. It is a reminder that trust must be earned, that appearances can deceive, and that wisdom ignored becomes tragedy. The flames of Troy lit the night sky, but from its ashes came new stories. Not all Trojans perished. Some escaped, guided by fate and the gods. Among them was Aeneas, a prince of Troy, who carried his aged father Anchises on his back and led his young son Ascanius by the hand. His wife was lost in the chaos, but Aeneas pressed forward, driven by destiny. Legend says that Aeneas wandered across the seas, eventually reaching Italy. There, his descendants would found Rome, the empire that would rule the known world. Thus, from the fall of Troy rose the seed of another civilization. Others were not so fortunate. Cassandra, the prophetess, was taken as a slave, her warnings forever remembered but never heeded. Andromache, Hector's widow, was dragged into captivity. The women of Troy became spoils of war, their lives shattered, their futures stolen. The Greeks, though victorious, were not spared tragedy. Their journey home was cursed. Odysseus wandered for 10 years, facing storms, monsters, and gods before reaching Ithaca. Agamemnon returned to Mycenae only to be murdered by his wife. The victory at Troy was bitter, its cost immense. The Trojan horse itself became a symbol that outlived the city. For centuries, poets, historians, and philosophers retold the story. Virgil, in his Aeneid, described the fall of Troy in vivid detail, ensuring that Rome would forever remember its Trojan roots. The phrase, Trojan horse, entered language as a warning. It came to mean any trick, any deception that hides danger within. In modern times, we use it to describe computer viruses that disguise themselves as harmless programs, political schemes that conceal hidden agendas, or business deals that mask betrayal. The lesson endures. Appearances can deceive. What looks like a gift may be a trap. What seems like victory may be defeat in disguise. The Trojan horse is not just a myth of the past. It is a mirror of the present. Think of scams online, where emails promise wealth but deliver theft. Think of relationships where charm hides manipulation. Think of politics, where promises conceal betrayal. The story reminds us, trust must be earned, not given blindly. Wisdom must be heard, even when it is inconvenient. Pride must be tempered, lest it blind us to danger. History speaks, if we are willing to listen. And the voice of Troy still echoes, beware of Greeks bearing gifts. The story of the Trojan Horse is more than a tale of warriors and gods. It is a mirror held up to humanity. For 10 years, Troy endured. For 10 years, the Greeks fought. And yet, in a single night, the city fell, not to strength, but to deception. The warnings of Cassandra were ignored. The courage of Laocoon was silenced. Pride blinded the Trojans, and trust betrayed them. The lesson is timeless. Appearances can deceive. What looks like a gift may be a trap. What seems like victory may hide defeat. In our own lives, we face Trojan horses every day. They come in the form of false promises, tempting offers, and charming lies. They come as scams online, as toxic relationships, as deals too good to be true. The story reminds us, trust must be earned, not given blindly. Wisdom must be heard, even when it is inconvenient. Pride must be tempered, lest it blind us to danger. History speaks, if we are willing to listen. And the voice of Troy still echoes, beware of Greeks bearing gifts. So I ask you, what lesson do you take from this story? Write it in English in the comments. Share your reflection, your sentence, your thought. Let us learn together, not only from the past, but from each other.